call underwriters, call assessors, call real estate attorneys, call, talk to as many people as you can and do as much research online as you possibly can to get your own determination.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
Welcome to the program, everybody. Dustin Harris hanging out once again on the podcast treadmill, trying to lose that weight, folks. We're getting close to the holiday season as we're recording this. Of course, it will play after the holiday season, but we're getting there and getting my beach body on. Have a great guest coming up and a great topic, I think, coming up. First, want to pause and remind you that we're sponsored by a great company called Alamode. Of course, Alamode is the software that I've been using for years. You should be as well. Go to alamode.com for more information. And Working RE Magazine is where I get my details on what's going on in the appraisal world. You should be as well. Check them out. Go to workingre.com. Again, workingre.com. I want to welcome a friend to the program, Mr. Scott Bacnkiewicz. Scott, welcome to the Appraiser Coach Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Dustin.
Really, really good having you. So, Scott, you are a licensed appraiser in the state of Michigan, right? For 28 years,
correct.
You've been doing this thing.
Yep, quite a while.
Very cool.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about the licensed part. So it's unusual for someone to be an appraiser for 28 years and not be certified. Talk to me about that situation.
So the whole certification came down at a very busy point in my life. I was running my own business, doing appraisals, and when they switched from licensed appraisers to certified residential appraisers, I was adopting 2 children from Russia, and that was taking up a large portion of my time.
Oh, that seems easy. Come on. It's from Russia. That seems like a
thing. Exactly. So we went through that whole process, and it was extensive personal time on my part. And I had my degree from Michigan State University, so I wasn't worried about getting the upgrade right away to certified residential because I had my what?
I said you got what you need, right?
Yeah, I got what I need to do it. And then I've just been so busy over the last what's it been, 10, 15 years since the switch over was taken. I've never actually needed it. I do 75% private work and have a lot of local clients that I do, and so they're not really concerned about the certified versus licensed residential. So in most cases,
I love it. Now I'm curious, do you have a different outlook now that things have kind of slowed down?
They haven't slowed down for me, because I switched from, I've been as busy as I want to be. And yeah, definitely I would consider upgrading my license, because obviously it lends more credibility to everything I do and that kind of thing. But I just haven't needed up until this point. So, I sometimes take the extra classes I need to more recently for that upgrade, but then just never go through the whole process. And now they want the logs going all the way back for all the hours, not just the difference between residential and certified. So that's
really
oh yeah, yep, yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's quite extensive what they want to do it, and so I just haven't made the effort. But yeah, it could be something I look at in the next couple of years, especially if it starts to slow down and I have more personal time to do so. So
I love this, and really I want to emphasize, because I get this question a lot as a coach. People reach out and they say, should I get to mostly trainees, right? They're working on, and they say, should I get licensed? Should I get certified? Does it matter? And I love where you're coming from, because if I can, dare parrot back what I think you're saying is, if most of your work is 75% you said is private work, it probably doesn't matter that much, right?
No, it doesn't. No.
Yeah.
You just have to do good work and present it to your clients and you're good to go. Divorce and estate settlements and those kind of things, they're not as concerned. They're concerned obviously that you have a license, but not that the levels of license and those kind of things. And
do you do much testifying when you're on the stand? I'm wondering if
we
the
don't
opposing
do a lot
counsel
of
would nail you.
we don't do a lot of testifying here in Michigan because for some reason, they almost always just split the difference between the two sides, or a lot of times the judge will order me to do an appraisal for both sides in a lot of cases. So I've testified in all the years that I've done it, and hundreds of divorce appraisals. I've testified twice. So yeah, and I'm interestingly enough, I'm preparing for another to testify in the coming weeks over dispute in a house that was sold on land contract with a split that couldn't happen. So it's a little bit different than a divorce or any of that stuff. So I actually look forward to testifying. It just doesn't happen around here very often.
Very cool. I want to get into the topic today, but before we do, I can't let the fact that you're a graduate of Michigan State pass, because maybe you don't know this, but I have a daughter at Michigan State right now.
I heard that. I saw that on social media. You were visiting her, and it's my alma mater, and it's pretty cool. So is she going to be a vet, or is she?
No, she is. She's actually going to school for social work, and specifically she's in trauma. So this will be her master's degree. She will graduate this coming spring. And then she plans on possibly moving to Norway, believe it or not, but some foreign country where she can help those in need. So
that's awesome. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great place. All right, cool. So I want to set this up, Scott. So a couple of weeks ago, at this point, it's going to be a couple months ago once this airs. There was a topic that Tim Anderson and I talked about. Now we do something called a Deer Use PAP instructor, where listeners, basically send in questions and we try our best to answer those questions. This one happened to be about non-arm's length transaction versus arm's length transaction. And we, of course, did the best we could on it. And then Scott reached out and shared some information I thought was great. And that's the whole purpose of this podcast, right? Is to spur discussion and conversation and knowledge and education. And so first of all, thank you, Scott, for reaching out. Number two, thank you for all the research you've done on this topic. I guess that's my first question is why has this been kind of a pet project for you? Why have you dove so far into the idea of arm's length versus non-arm's length transactions?
So on social media, I posed this question because I ran into a tenant purchase on, doing appraisal work, and it was for a lender. And I posed the question online, it's non-arm's length transaction, or is it? And I got the same reaction that you get every time you pose this question. Yes, it is. No, it isn't. Yes, it is. No, it isn't. So I wanted to know for myself what the correct answer is, and most importantly, why. Why am I answering this question on their appraisal report, and what's the purpose of the question? Why does the lender want to know on page 1 of the URAR, is this an arm's length transaction or isn't it?
Let's start with that. Why do they? In your opinion, why does Fannie, Freddie, why do they care that the appraiser knows whether it's an arm's length or not an arm's length transaction?
So a mortgage fraud takes place in almost all cases between parties who know each other. So they have a familiarity. They set up a straw purchase, or they set up some sort of a cashback scheme on the side that's not part of the contract. Or for instance, I did one and I didn't even realize it was a non-arm's length transaction during the process. It was a sale between cousins. The price was overinflated, and the cousin was going to kick back the down payment to the other cousin.
Yep.
It wasn't part of the contract. They didn't, they ended up reducing the sales price and coming to a different terms, but that wasn't part of the purchase agreement. It wasn't part of the, they didn't let me know that they were cousins going into it. I discovered it later on as part of the process of interviewing the buyer and seller and analyzing the contract and stuff like that. And I also didn't understand why the price was so overinflated. It was because they were trying to give back the down payment. And you don't know if things like that are taking place in any of the contracts with when parties know each other or are close friends, relatives, any of that stuff, which is what the lender wants to, they can have them sign an affidavit that says there's no terms outside the contract or there's no additional terms besides the contract. It's just, there's nothing illegal, immoral, or improper about an arm's length transaction between parties with a relationship.
Got it. Well, let's dive into that just a little bit, because I guess the big question that I think listeners might be asking right now is, well, how do you know then? If you look at a contract and it's got the same last name, well, okay, there you got a red flag, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean, that just because two last names, I mean, Harris is a pretty common last name. There's a possibility that it could be selling or buying from, somebody with the same last name. But a lot of times they're not the same last name, right? They may not even be blood related. They may just be related in other ways. So I guess that's the question. How do you know? How does an appraiser?
I think when this topic is brought up, a lot of times what happens is people will say that it has to be on the market, and that's not part of the definition of market value. But almost every non-arm's length transaction takes place, hasn't been listed on the market. Why would you list the house for sale and sell to your son? Right. Why would a tenant or a landlord list the house and then sell to his tenant? Why would, if I'm selling to my best friend and I'm excluding everybody else from the market, why would I list the house for sale and then sell it to my best friend? Right. You know what I mean? So that's not the definition of market value. Doesn't include, although in my research, some things have suggested that it has to be on the market, but most definitions don't include being on the market as part of a non-arm's length or an arm's length transaction. But it's a good place to start your research as to why wasn't this house listed for sale? Right. Are the parties involved? Do they know each other? Do they, have a relationship of any kind? And is it important that the lender understands this for their transaction purposes?
So I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but it does bring up a question. What does it mean to be on the market? Right. So and I know that's a silly question, because most appraisers, well, if it's on the MLS, but what if it's not on the MLS, but it's on Zillow? Is that on the market? What if it's on the
I would consider that on the market, wouldn't you?
I would think so. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. It's listed for sale in some way, and it's marketed to the public versus selling to an individual that you already have a relationship with. And I mean, why does a landlord sell to his tenant? Because he doesn't have to evict the tenant, get the house prepared for sale and staged or whatever they're going to do to the house, and then sell it to a buyer who's going to have a home inspection and do all this thing, and they have to pay commission to the agent, so they sell it to the tenant. Why does the tenant want to purchase the house from the landlord? Because they don't want to move, they don't want to have to find other accommodations. As a matter of fact, the tenant might be forced to make a decision to buy the house or move to a different rental property at the time the owner decides to sell the property. So, I mean, does a tenant really want to move and or purchase the property? They might want to rent for one more year and then move to a different state or something like that. You know what I mean?
Well, and I know, Scott, you would agree with this, that, you mentioned that not being on the market is a starting point, but it's certainly not the ending point. That can't be the definition of arm's length, because we know there's many times that things are sold off market, that, there's pocket listings and things take place that are not necessarily non-arm's length, but yet they're off market. So let's go to the next level, right? So, okay, it's not on the market. Now what? I mean, how deep does an appraiser have to go to find out this information?
I don't think you have to go very deep. I mean, you just ask the seller if they have a relationship of any kind with the buyer. I mean, the Fannie Mae's definition of a non-arm's length transaction are purchase transactions, which there's a relationship or business affiliation between the seller and the buyer, including, I have underwriting guidelines from several lenders that include related by blood or marriage, fiance or domestic partner, employer or business partner, renters buying from the landlord,
Okay.
you know, builder developer, you know, that these underwriting guidelines specifically say, you know, is it a friend, is it a close friend, or why are you selling to this one party without and excluding the market in general?
Okay.
Versus, you know, how do you know them? Why do
So
you know
I was going to ask a next question, but I'm going to ask and answer, not
Okay.
because I think I know the answer, but because I want to make sure I know the answer. Okay. So
Okay.
I'm curious what your opinion is. So the question I was going to ask is, what if somebody lies to you? And the answer that I want to give is, that's not our responsibility
No,
if
it
we
isn't.
document.
Right.
Right.
You're,
So
you're absolutely correct.
if we've asked the question, we got the answer, and we in our work file state that, you know, on such and such date, I called such and such, I asked this, and here was the answer. Would you agree that that's going to be somewhat of a CYA?
Yes. And that's the whole point of marking non-arm's length transaction on the appraisal report is just to say, hey, these two know each other. You might want to see if there's any other terms or conditions or anything else outside of the contract, because I can't, you know, I'm not a detective. I'm not going to be able to, and even if I was, they could still lie to me and tell me there isn't any other terms, or they don't know each other, or they don't, you know what I mean? So
we have a responsibility, but how far that
yes.
goes is in question, right?
Yes, exactly.
Very
exactly.
Good. We're talking with Scott Bacnkiewicz out of Michigan, and talking about arm's length transaction. With Scott, when we get back, I'd love to hit this question: is why are appraisers so divided on this topic? Because they truly are. First, I want to pause and remind you that we are sponsored by a great company called A La Mode. Scott and I were talking right before the program that he switched to A La Mode in the past, and I think the thing that he said was, I'm so glad that I did. Folks, you will be as well. There's some great software out there. Let's face it. Some really good report writing software for residential appraisers. You cannot beat A La Mode. That's bottom line. There's a reason they're number one. You can find out more by going to their website at alamode.com or 800 A La Mode. And speaking of the best, if you want to get the best and most recent information about what's going on in your industry as an appraiser, please go to workingre.com. You can sign up for their free blog. It's free right on their website. Just put your email in there, and a couple times a week, you'll get an email from them. Maybe once a week, you'll get an email from them. It is awesome, the information that you'll get. Again, it's workingre.com, workingre.com. All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Dustin Harris hanging out once again. Good friend Scott Bacnkiewicz on the program, talking about arm's length transactions. Thank you for being on, Scott.
Thank you for having
Really appreciate
me.
all the research you've done, all the knowledge that you bring to the program. This is super helpful for us appraisers as we deal with a topic that is, for some reason, a very controversial topic. As you mentioned, every time it's posted on social media, you've got, you know, people that say yes, people that say no, and honestly, it feels like it's a hill they want to die on. It's like they feel very strongly about it.
It is, and I really don't understand it, because it doesn't seem like it would matter much to most appraisers. You know, they have a relationship, check non-arm's length and explain it. It's simple, straightforward. There's nothing illegal. You know, there's nothing that says they can't get the transaction done if it's arm's length. It's just sometimes the underwriting guidelines are a little bit different. They might need more paperwork. The terms might be a little bit different for a non-arm's length transaction, or they might have to provide additional documentation. It doesn't make any sense why some appraisers are so split on this issue. One thing I did find in all of my research that adds to the confusion is that you can prove, like to the IRS, that your transaction is similar to an arm's length transaction, even though it took place between parties with a relationship or related parties. So
talk to me about that. What does that mean?
It's called the at arm's length principle. So if you can prove to the IRS that your transaction took place at terms that were similar to a non-arm's length or to an arm's length transaction, sorry, I keep going back and forth, then you don't have to pay the gift tax per se, if there was going to be a gift tax, or if you and how do you prove that a transaction took place at terms similar than to an arm's length transaction, even though it's not arm's length? You get an appraiser to prove that it's
shocking, right? And that actually leads to a question that I had, Scott, because one of the things that Tim and I talked about was, sometimes a red flag is the purchase price itself, right? If you as an appraiser are coming, or you think that this is worth somewhere around 300,000, and yet the purchase price is 250 or it's 400, you might say, well, what's going on here, right?
Yes, exactly. But it still doesn't change. I mean, none of that. You can have an arm's length transaction that takes place above or below market value, and you can have a non-arm's length transaction that takes place at market value, above or below market value. So it's just, there's nothing in any of the definitions of arm's length or non-arm's length that says it has to be at market value.
Okay.
To take place. So, but it's a good, you're right, it is a good, okay, why is this selling for so much more? Like the example I gave between cousins, or why is it selling for so much less?
Yeah. It's a clue anyway, right? You said we're not detectives, but yet we still have to kind of be a little bit, right? Okay. Yeah. Good points. I want to talk a little bit about, because, obviously we're focused on the Fannie Mae selling guide. We're focused on lender. That's what most appraisers do. You are an example of one that does most of your work outside the lending world. Does this matter to the non-lending side of things? And if it does or doesn't, talk to us about why.
It doesn't matter because it's the question isn't even brought up on the general purpose appraisal report form. So you don't have to answer a question that's not asked of you.
Sure.
First of all. Secondly, if you do want to explain it, why do you even have to use the term arm's length or non-arm's length when you're talking about the transaction? So you're doing a sale between a tenant and a landlord, but why do you can just say it's a sale between a tenant and landlord. You don't have to bring up an arm's length or non-arm's length for that purpose. Fannie Mae, I think, has it on their form so that they can, it's not a red flag per se, but it's a flag saying, this is what it is. Do a little more due diligence on this transaction and make sure that everything's above board and everything's okay. And so non-lending, there's just, and some people bring up, well, first of all, why would you even be doing a purchase transaction for a tenant purchase? Or for friends that are selling a house? When I've done them, it's because the landlord or the tenant wants to know what the value is before they write the purchase agreement to purchase the property. So it's not, at that point, it's not even a purchase transaction. It's what is the house going to sell for on the market, so you're not even analyzing a contract for purchase at that point in time. So you're not even trying to determine whether it's arm's length or not arm's length. And
speaking
then people,
of which, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, people also say, well, what about comps?
If I use, that's actually the question I was going to ask. Yeah. Could you use one as a comp? Yeah.
So is there, would you even know about a tenant purchase if you didn't do the appraisal for it at one point in time? No, you probably wouldn't come up as a comparable. And even if you didn't know about it and wanted to use it, couldn't you state that it took place at terms similar to an arm's length transaction, even though it was a non-arm's length transaction?
If you did the appraisal, sure. Yeah, you would know that.
Yeah. So you could use that information for that purpose if you wanted to use it as a comparable. But most of the time it's not even going to be available to you as general knowledge because it wasn't listed or sold on the market, So there's no reason to even analyze arm's length, non-arm's length.
For sure.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay, as we wrap up, Scott, you brought up, and I think it's a no-brainer, right, that appraisers are very divided on this subject. So even after listening to this podcast, I guarantee there's somebody that's grumpy in their car and they're mad right now and they're saying, "Gosh darn it, I don't think that's right." What would you say to an appraiser who hears this podcast is still not convinced?
Do your own research. Do it yourself. I didn't rely on what anybody said. I went to underwriters. I got printouts of underwriter guidelines. I've got, email back from FHA that states that identity of interest is a non-arm's length transaction. I don't know why they called it an identity of interest instead of non-arm's length. But that's the way they phrase it in the FHA.
It's a cool way. I mean, I'm an identity of interest. I like that.
Right. Right. So, I mean, call underwriters, call assessors, call real estate attorneys, call, talk to as many people as you can and do as much research online as you possibly can to get your own determination. Don't listen to me.
I love it. I love it.
I'd love to see some information that says a tenant purchase for lender transaction can be arm's length. It just doesn't say that anywhere, and I've never found anything that says it anywhere.
Well, one thing I'll say about you, Scott, is not only are you willing to come out and share this information on the program, but the information that you sent me was honestly overwhelming. So much data, so much information, and it all came about because you were curious and wanted to know. And I think that if nothing else, if people get nothing else out of this podcast today, that should be a lesson to any appraiser, right? If you have a question on something and you don't fully understand it, do your own damn research. Do what Scott did and learn.
Yeah. I mean, that's our job, isn't it?
Last time I checked.
Research, verify, and analyze. I mean, that's what we get paid to do, right?
There you go.
So
Mr. Scott Bacnkiewicz, thank you, my friend. You still live in Michigan?
Yes. Awesome. So what happened, I moved 2 hours north of my hometown that I grew up in and lived for 52 years, with the exception of I moved to Maryland for 1 year after I graduated from college.
Okay.
And so me and my wife we waited till the kids graduated and moved out. And so we sold our house in my hometown and that I lived in for 25 years. And so we got a place up north that's closer to my father, who's retired, and so we can be closer to him. But I still drive back because I'm so familiar with the area and I have so many clients built up in that area, 1 day a week to do my inspections, and then drive back up and do most of my work on the computer, as most other appraisers do at home.
I think anybody who is watching this on YouTube would say you're full of crap because you're like 33 years old. You look very young, my friend. Thank you for being on.
Thank
By
you.
the way,
I appreciate it.
Speaking of YouTube, folks, if you're on there, please like this, if you will. It helps. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Scott Bacnkiewicz, thank you, my friend, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
Thanks, Dustin. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.